Hey, this is Flash Body Mechanics 2, Walk, Leap, and Settle. So today we're going to finish off our walk cycle by animating the upper body. And we're going to learn how to save a walk cycle to use it in any Flash file. And we'll practice some more body mechanics using our workflow and incorporating animation principles as always. So go into your Flash Body Mechanics 2, Walk, Leap, and Settle, or just open that up. Alright, so most Flash productions, if you're working, especially if you're working on a TV series, usually we animate the walk cycle once and then it exists in its own file, and then we just bring it into, if we're working on a scene where a character needs to walk, we'll just import it into that scene. So we just reuse the walk. So as soon as you open this up, you'll see there's this new background here, which our character is going to walk in and basically leap off this step. So you'll see we have our shot comp and camera view layers as usual. So the first thing we need to do is bring in our walk cycle from last class. You can do that by going to File, Import to Stage, which will bring it onto our stage, or Import to Library, which will bring it into a library, and then it can be dragged onto the stage, making sure that you have the right layer selected. But I'm going to do it like this. I like to open it up. I'm going to open up, go back and navigate to the walk cycle we did last class, the animated one, and just open it up so I have both files open. I'm just doing it this way so it doesn't crash. You can see we have our walk cycle in this file. Alright, so in today's file we're gonna go in, let's go into the shot comp, select the background and double click to get in there, and you'll see I have at the top I have the notes from last class and the Preston Blair walk reference. Just keep those hidden and locked for now. We have our background layer, which will lock, and we have a size reference. So this is just a JPEG that I stuck in here on a layer so that we can size the body to the appropriate size and proportions once we have everything imported. Inside the shot comp, let's create a new layer and just make sure it's underneath the background here. Just double click and rename it walk. Okay, so we're going to bring our walk cycle in on that layer. So go to your animated walk file and just double click to get in the shot comp, and we're going to select the symbol that encompasses his whole walk cycle. So just go to frame 1, right click on it and select copy. Go back to today's file. Make sure you have the walk layer selected. I like to place the time marker on frame 1. Just right click and select paste and center. If you get this resolve library conflict window, select put duplicate items into a folder and just press OK. And now we have our walk cycle in here on this walk layer that we created. So I'm just going to zoom in and fix this now, resize the walk. So just select it, bring your pivot to the toe so it scales down toward the toe. You can bring it right on top of the image and just give it an approximate scale. In this image he's standing straight up, and in this walk file he's bent down a little bit, so it can be a little bit lower. Just make sure that the pelvis is approximately the right size and just bring that over off the image there. So in this file I've provided the entire mannequin body. So just go over to your library and you'll see a folder that says mannequin. Click on the arrow to expand it, and we'll go down and select F 3/4 comp. That'll be the entire composition of the mannequin 3/4 front view, and we'll just drag that right onto the stage. So make sure your walk layer is selected before you drag it on. So what we want to do is we want to get the upper body from this guy into the upper body of this comp here. So let's just double click on this, select the entire upper body, make sure you get the hands, not the pelvis. So we just want this part here. So you can just right click on that and cut it, and then we're going to double click out in the space here, get back inside of our walk cycle, double click on that symbol, and just go right to the top, select the top layer and create new layer, and you'll see layer 2. Go to frame 1 and right click and select paste and center and just bring it over, and now we can resize the upper body. So just free transform. Always bring the pivot when you're posing the upper body for this mannequin. Always bring the pivot to this corner of the pelvis. Just through trial and error I found that it's the best place to put it for the most natural movements. And just give that an approximate scale. Again, he's standing straight up in this image, so the head doesn't have to be on the same line, but that looks close. Alright, so then what we want to do is let's double click to get back out. We don't need this lower body anymore, so we're just going to delete that. You can just press delete on your keyboard and it's gone. Now we have the entire character inside our walk symbol, and he's scaled, and if we just scrub through you'll see you'll have your lower body walking and the upper body standing still. So the first thing we're going to do is complete our walk cycle, animating the upper body, and then we'll go into the second part and have him leap off the step. Alright, so let's dive into our symbol here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, we brought our upper body into this walk cycle comp, but all the layers are in, all his parts and pieces for his upper body are still on one layer. So let's just select the entire upper body, right click and select distribute to layers. And now we have all of his body parts on each layer. And then we can just get rid of this layer 2 that we created earlier. Just right click and delete layer. Alright, so now we can go ahead and go to each one of our key poses that we had set for last class. If this is your first walk cycle, just follow the walk reference. We're going to go back and turn that on. So I'm just going to double click out here in space. Turn on our Preston Blair walk cycle. And then we're going to dive back in here and set our first pose. So we'll set our contact pose first, following the reference for the upper body. And with the walk cycle, now that we're animating the upper body, with the walk cycle, it's always when the left leg's forward, the right arm's back, and vice versa. So we're going to be posing our right arm back to counterbalance the left leg. So again, selecting the entire arm, like we've done before, move the pivot to the shoulder and just pose it back. I'm going to give the hand a bit of a rotation. This will be to anticipate some drag on the arm. Okay, so that looks about right. Have a look at where our key pose was for our walk cycle. You can see that it's here. We have a lot of in-betweens going on, but you can see where the poses were. I believe they were 4 frames apart. So we're going to select an entire row for the upper body, F6, and we're going to set the next pose, which is pose 2. That's our squash pose for our walk cycle. And you can see too, if you scrub over it, you can see the pelvis is moving up and down. So we're going to have to lower the entire upper body first. That's the first thing I'm going to do before I start posing the arms out. And you really do want this torso to connect at the back of the hip here, and you can see how that connects perfectly in the image. If you want, you can bring this image. You can go back out. You can go back out to the shot comp area and bring this image down closer if you wish. I think I'll do that now. So you have to unlock it. The easiest way to select it is just grab the 2 keys on frame 1. And just move it down. And just lock those back up. And then we can go back inside our walk cycle comp. Alright, so I already moved the upper body down. And we're going to pose out the arms. So now if we scrub over it and take a look, let's take a look at the right leg. So it goes from contact, and we're going into like a squash or recoil pose. So since the right leg is coming back, it's starting to move back, the right arm's going to start to swing forward. And we're going to just start to bring the arm back a little bit. And we're not going to bring it back too much. We're just going to move it a little bit so that it slows out of the contact pose. But we can start to drag the hand a little. So again, we'll do the same thing with the left arm. Just bring it down a little. And we can drag the hand. Okay. So that's good for now. We're just roughing this in. Don't forget our workflow. We're always blocking and then refining. So we're still doing that here. We're going to block and refine. So this is going to be rough for now. Alright, let's go to the third key pose we're going to set and just press F6. So we have the whole upper body. I'm just going to move the pivot to that corner of the torso. So now this is pose 3. So this is the swing pose. So again, that right leg's coming back, so the left arm's got to come forward. Now this one we can bring, you can see in the image here, Preston Blair's drawing, the arm's pretty much in front of the body at this point. I'm going to leave the hand dragged a little bit. I'm going to give the elbow a bit of a bend here and try and get it close to that as possible. The Preston Blair image is just referenced, so you don't have to get it exactly. Okay, so you can see that the forearm and hand is on top of our pelvis here, so we're going to have to move those. We'll do it later, but we don't want to do it now as we're animating, just so that we can have all these layers at the top. It's easier for setting keys for now, but later on we'll fix that layering issue just by moving we can just drag and move the layers above or below each other, but we'll do that later. Okay, and we'll also swap the hands out later. We're not going to do that just yet. Okay, that's fine for now. Let's go to our next key pose. Select the entire row, 4 frames down, F6, and this will be our next contact pose. And let's not forget to bring the entire upper body back down to hook up with the pelvis. I'm looking in this area here to make sure that it aligns properly. So let's go to our next key pose. Select the whole row and press F6. This is the next squash pose again, back to 2. I'm going to complete the full walk cycle, and again the arm, just like on the other side, the arm's only going to come down a little bit. We're going to slow out of this pose and just leave the arm dragged. That's fine for now. Now we have an arm that's behind the torso, so if you have trouble selecting it, you can always go up to your layers. This button will show all layers as outlines, so if you click that, it'll show everything as outlines. It's an easier way to select pieces if you need to look through the character, and then you can just click it again to put it back to normal. So I'm just going to get the whole character here. Get the upper body down first, match that up. We're going to set our next pose, which is the swing pose, and then the last one will be our final contact pose for the other foot. Sometimes this swing pose looks a little funky because the arms are in front of the body, depending on the character you're working with. Alright, so I'll set off final pose now. Select the entire row, and that's going to be the same as frame 1. So really what I'm going to do is just copy, select the whole row, copy frames, and then select this row and right click and paste frames. There we go. So if we scrub through, you can see that we have the upper body blocked out. And I'm just noticing here that I didn't move the entire upper body for the second last pose here. So I'll select that. So now we're pretty much finished blocking, and now we can go ahead and start refining this. So I'm just going to scrub through and take a look at where there's any issues. I can see that I'm having a look at the elbows. The elbows don't seem to be breaking anywhere or coming away from each other, and neither do the hands. So that's a good sign. Okay, so one thing I really want to do here is lean them forward a bit. Remember when we did our walk cycle, we tilted the pelvis. We should probably get the upper body leaning forward as well. Remember how we talked about walking is sort of like controlled falling, or it's been described as controlled falling. So we want to always think about that, especially if it's a fast walk. Even if it's a slower walk, the character should be tilted forward just a little bit. So I'm just doing this on our last frame. So we'll just tilt them forward a bit. I'm just going to go back and do all of these. Easy way to select the entire upper body here is just to do it right in your layers, right on your keys. Alright, so that's finished. Now I'm going to scrub through that and see how it looks. That looks pretty good. Okay, so one other thing I want to do is just maybe tilt the head up a little bit and give the head a little bit of overlapping action, or at least just have it move somewhat. So on our contact pose, I'm just going to go through and refine the head a little bit. So I tilt it up so he's looking straight ahead. And actually how the head drops, that's fine. On the way back up, on this swing pose, let's give it a bit of overlap, just to give it the impression of weight. So as his entire body's lifting, the head is going to tilt down a little bit, giving it the impression of weight. And sometimes we can even just move it down just ever so slightly. You can arrow key it down, just to give it the impression that it's as he's lifting, his head's going to bob down a little bit because it's heavy. And back to our contact pose. We could probably just copy this frame over here. Frame 1 to our contact pose. Okay, so I'm just going to play that. Okay, so the head's moving a little too much for my liking. And you know what, I'm thinking we should probably just keep this really subtle. Ever so slightly changing the head, scrubbing through and seeing how it looks. There, that should be okay now. That's okay. You can spend more time on that and refine it further if you like, but it should be subtle. Okay, so let's fix this layering issue. So we want to get that forearm behind the pelvis. So our upper and lower pelvis are down here. Let's just grab the forearm, just select the offending forearm, and we'll bring it down underneath the pelvis. That's good, and we'll do the same thing with the hand. Bring it down under the pelvis, and it should actually be behind the leg as well, the upper leg. So we'll grab the hand, bring it down under the thigh layer, and that's fixed. There we go. So our walk's complete. Feel free to refine it further. I noticed that the torso is jumping around a little bit on the pelvis. So you can see that it's pretty subtle. Take a good look at it, refine it where you see any flaws. You can refine this further, but for now in this video we'll just stop it here. We can copy and paste this entire walk cycle down the timeline and just have it repeating inside our walk comp, our walk cycle symbol. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to leave this as a cycle on its own. So if you select the symbol, our walk symbol, which is our walk comp, and go to the properties, make sure that under looping, it's under options, it's looping is checked and it's on loop. It is set to loop. So that means that this symbol is going to just loop that walk cycle, and under first it's set to 1, meaning the loop starts at frame 1. So once it gets to frame 25 here, it's just going to jump right back to 1, bounce back out again. So if we play this, we'll just see a looping walk cycle. Okay, so let's go ahead and animate this walk cycle right up to the point where he's going to start to leap. We're going to have this walk cycle turn off and a new mannequin switch on. So let's go, say, up to frame 50. Just for now, we'll see how that looks. Select the frame on frame 50 and F6 that. And I'm going to hold shift down and right arrow key. We'll leave some room for his foot here. And let's in between that. Classic between that. So let's scrub over. Some minimal sliding on the feet. Yeah, there is some, as I mentioned earlier, you should refine this further. We're just going through this rather quickly for the sake of the class, but you can see the feet do slide near the end. There's some popping in the feet. You should try and eliminate that as much as possible. And also I'm noticing that the arms, when they swing, I didn't slow in and slow out very much. I did it, but not really enough. So for this walk cycle, you wouldn't want these arms hitting those extreme poses so hard. Where the arms are positioned on the contact pose, you'd want to soften the ease in and ease out. Think of a pendulum swinging. We're going to create a new layer. So click on your size reference layer, or whatever layer is underneath your walk layer, and create new layer. And let's name it Leap. Okay, so in this layer we're going to bring the entire 3/4 mannequin comp in. So let's just bring it right in. Let's go to File and Open. Click on open up the mannequin front 3/4 that is provided for you. Copy. Go back to today's file, and we're going to paste it in this new Leap layer here. So just select select frame 1, right click on the stage, and paste in center. And then select Put Duplicate Items in Folder. Okay, so we're going to scale him down to match our size reference. Alright, so just slide it over once you have him sized up properly, or sized down properly. Okay, so we're going to move him over to the point, somewhere around the point where he starts to leap off the step. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to switch our walk comp off and turn on our leap comp. So just go to the frame right next to the last frame of the walk. You can right click and let's choose Insert Blank Keyframe. So what that does is it just ends the animation. Turns off the symbol. So if you go to our leap layer and select the frame right underneath our last frame of the walk cycle, we can insert another blank keyframe here. Actually, another way to do it is just to grab the first frame, make sure you have it selected, and drag it over right underneath that blank keyframe that we set. And it'll automatically create a blank keyframe at frame 1. So now we have the walk switching off and this new comp switching on. So what we're going to have to do is match these poses up, the last pose of our walk cycle and the first pose of our leap. So what we could do for now, this is how it's going to end up, but for now just grab the key that we have on the leap layer, and we'll just move it right underneath the last key of the walk cycle so that we can see them both at the same time. And let's just go into our leap cycle. We'll double click on that. Actually, I'm going to bounce back out. I have to set the frames, so we have to create some new frames, animatable frames. So we're up to 100 here. We'll go inside our leap comp and we'll set that at 100. Insert frames up to 100. So we're on frame 50. Frame 50 is where the switch is going to happen, or it'll actually be on frame 51, but we'll go and stay on frame 50 for now. Get inside here. You can actually so we can start animating right from frame 1, because this symbol, the encompassing symbol of this comp that we're going to use for the leap, we're going to set it to play once, because we don't want this to loop. This isn't going to be a cycle. And we're going to have it, because it says first frame 1, it's going to start at frame 1. So we can animate this animation right from frame 1. So what's happening is this symbol is repeating the cycle that's inside of it. It's repeating this symbol, this animation over and over and over. And then we're going to switch to this new comp, which is just going to be animating from frame 1 on the inside of it. So we're going to match up these two poses. First of all, it looks like our sizing is a little incorrect here. Let's just size him up a little bit. Alright, so let's move him over. You can just grab all of his pieces. Let's get the pelvis in the right spot, and then we'll work from there. Usually when I'm animating, it's when I'm starting to set a new pose. The first thing I really think about is the main part of the body here, the torso, neck, and head, and pelvis. This whole center of the body, animate first, and then we pose the legs and arms accordingly. Okay, so since he's in mid-motion in this walk, the first pose of our leap, we're going to go into an anticipation pose. But right now, this very first pose is going to be something sort of in between the last walk pose and our anticipation pose. So the next pose we set is going to be the anticipation pose. This one's just going to be sort of a transition pose. So I'm bringing the arms out with the elbows out, because I know that our anticipation pose is going to be, his arms are going to be cocked back, to give him energy for the leap, and then he's going to swing his arms forward when he leaps. So I know the anticipation pose is going to be something with his arms, his elbows up high, and his fists clenched. And so we're going to break the elbows and wrists for the anticipation pose on the next one. But this is an in-between between, we're just sort of getting an in-between or a breakdown pose. So I'm just bringing them up a little bit for now, and then we'll bring them up further later. So these upper legs, I'm just going to bring them down. Okay, so we have a left leg contact pose on that previous pose. Yeah, so the foot's going to have to be planted, so we're going to leave that foot there. And we'll refine this later. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the timeline. Now we're selecting the entire row for the entire body. F6. Set a key. And we're going to go into our next pose, our anticipation pose. If you go inside the torso, you'll notice we have 3/4 front profile, 3/4 back, and there's different ones for each I'm going to go with the second, maybe the third torso. So that's on frame 3. So double click to get back out. Make sure the torso symbol is selected, and in our properties, under first, I'm going to punch in 3. That'll switch it to this bent torso. And we're going to just pose that a little better. So too, I'm going to skew this just to give it a bit of something that looks like more of a correct perspective on it. Always in the center of the body first. Alright, so he's going to anticipate his pose, but I want to make sure that he's looking where he's going to leap. So we're going to keep his head up to make sure he's looking, and I'm also going to just bring the head down just to give him just to give us the impression that he's hunching forward a little bit better. Okay, and again, now this is going to be, as I was talking about earlier, the anticipation pose. He's going to be cocking his arms up, getting ready to leap. So this is having his arms move back like that. He's anticipating his arms swinging forward. That's what it is, and creating energy for the jump. Now in this pose, I want to keep the right foot planted, so I'm not going to touch the right foot. I'm just going to bring the leg forward. Okay, so this will do for now. We're just blocking things out. So just like when we animated our ball bounce, we have to get this guy to launch into the air. So we're going to go with a really extended pose. And it's going to be quick. So I'm only going to go 2 frames down the timeline, so that we have one in between our anticipation pose and this new launch pose we're about to set. So I'm going to select the entire row, all of his body parts, F6 to key it, and we're going to start moving him into his launch pose. Let's turn onion skinning on. So again, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to work on the center of the body first, that being the torso, neck, and head, and pelvis. And we can see that we have some layering issues here, so we're just going to move those layers. It's these 3 here. You can hold control down to select all of them. And let's bring it above the head. So you just drag and release, and that's fixed. Let's put these back together, and we'll continue posing. I think we actually need to move him over a little bit so that the feet look like they left this location and he's not moving back. So I'm just selecting the entire character now in this launch pose and bringing him forward. So use your arrow keys if you wish. And we're going to space these drawings out. Make sure that they're spaced apart, nice and far apart. We're probably going to have to do some in-betweening, but for now we're just going to pose this out. Okay, so for the next pose, he's going to be at the top of his jump. He's going to be approaching the top of his jump. So we're going to do 3 poses for the top. So 1, 2, and 3 that are going to be very close together at the top. And that's going to give us our path of action that arcs through the top of the jump, just like our ball bounce, where it's going to slow in and slow out. And then he's going to drop very quickly, just like he does when he launches. Drop very quickly and impact the ground. And we're going to go, I think, 3 frames down the timeline. 1, 2, 3, and then the next one will be 3 as well, and then 3 again. Okay, so at this point I'm going to go to a file that I've already created. We can just close out these other 2 files that we have open, the walk, the animated walk, don't save the changes, the mannequin 3/4, don't save the changes, and then let's open up, I'm just going to show you a file that I have created earlier. This is it here. I'll go into the shot comp. So he walks in, that's where the switch occurs, and then this is just blocked in. So I have the leap part, the leap section of this exercise blocked in. Go to the frame where it switches to mannequin leap, and I'm going to take a look inside. Now this is the entire thing blocked out. So this is the pose that we were on. The next pose, I went 1, 2, 3 down the timeline. No, I didn't do the hands and feet. I hadn't gotten there yet, but this is the next pose. I'll turn on onion skinning so you can see. So these are all the poses. So after the launch pose, we have 1, 2, and 3. These are the 3 top poses of our leap. Now you can see that they're close together. Let's just take a look at those 3. So this was the next pose we were going to set. In this pose, the knees start to come up, the elbows and arms start to come down, and then this is the very top of the arc. So you can see that these 2 drawings are fairly close together, and the arms come down even more. Elbows are starting to come down to his side, and the knees are coming up. That's about as high as they're going to go before they start to come down again to get into a landing pose. The third pose for the top of the jump is this one here, where the arms are back. Now his whole body is starting to fall at this point, so just to give us the illusion of weight, I brought his knees up, so his legs are starting to drag a little bit from his hips, and I'm starting to bring his arms forward in this one as well. Now for the next pose, we're only going 2 frames down the timeline, because this is going to be a quick motion, and he goes back into something that's very similar to the launch pose, where his body is completely straight, but his arms are dragging behind a little bit because he's falling, and we want his arms to drag behind. It just looks it gives us a nice silhouetted pose, and again gives us the impression of weight in this character. Legs are completely extended forward, anticipating the impact, and then the next frame I actually had him impact the ground. This is a bit of an in-between drawing, or you can call it a breakdown drawing or pose, where his arms are still back. He hasn't had the full impact of the full weight of the impact hasn't taken place on his upper body, but his feet have planted and his knees are starting to bend. And then in the last pose, just 1 frame apart. Sorry, this pose, this drop pose, impact, or contact and impact are all 1 frame apart. So this is going to be a very quick movement. In this final impact pose, he hits the ground. Gravity is taking effect on his entire body now as he's leaning forward, and I switched the torso to the torso number 2 so that it's bent. And in this pose we can really bring his arms up high and bring the head down too, so it looks like he's hunched forward, and get his pelvis and his whole upper body down as far as you can. Just push this pose as far as you can to get him as crunched as possible to give us the impression of weight. And then 3 more frames down the timeline, 1, 2, 3. I included a bit of a squash, so that included selecting the entire character, moving the pivot to the bottom, and just squashing it in Y and an equal amount in X. So again, we went for the impact, and then we squashed him a bit after 3 frames. 3 more frames down, we just came back up, so just unsquash him 3 more frames down the timeline. So that'll give us a nice, so 3 and 3, that's 6 frames. That'll give us a nice ease in and ease out for the impact. And then I left 8 frames down the timeline. He rises back up to his neutral position. So that once that's in between, I would ease that. So let's go ahead and we'll go through this and let's refine this. Alright, so let's just show you all the frames, all the poses of the leap. Alright, so go through and block out your entire leap. It should look something like this. The most important part here is the timing. When he launches up from his anticipation pose, it's very quick. The key poses are close together in the timeline, so there's less in-betweens, but the drawings are further apart. And then at the top of the leap, he's going to hang there for a bit, so the drawings should be closer together with more in-betweens in the timeline. And then the same thing on the other side of this, as he's starting to drop, This is going to happen quickly, so there's a big space here between these drawings, and then he impacts the ground, ease in, ease out, and then a nice ease to settle. So go ahead and finish off blocking your leap, and then we'll start refining it. Alright, so we're at a point now where we can start to tween all of our main poses for the leap. Now if you're having a problem and you're constantly selecting the shadow by accident, you can just lock that. It should be the very bottom layer. You can just click on the padlock. Alright, so we're going to select an entire row in between our first and second key pose. Right click and go to classic tween. You'll immediately see all the pieces of our character start to animate in a linear fashion from point A to point B, but we'll fix those later. So go through and just tween everything. Okay, so now if we play it, first thing I want to look at is the timing. I'm going to ignore all these pieces getting all jumbled up. Don't worry about that right now. We're going to fix that as part of our refining stage. We really just want to just play it. Click back to frame 1 and play. Just keep playing it, looking at it. Really scrutinize the timing. So I'm thinking the timing actually looks pretty good here. He launches quickly, he hangs in the air, impacts the ground, and then settles. Let's use Flash's ease function in some areas here. So let's go to the pose that's at the very top of the leap. So select the entire row in between the two keys, the two key poses, and we'll go to our properties area and we'll increase this to 100 just to get it closer to the next pose, and then we'll go in between the next two key poses, select the entire row, and we'll bring that down to -100. Now I'm just going to check and see how this looks when I play it. That works out pretty good. It gives them a little more hang time at the top. So we're going to ease into the settle pose. So we'll increase that to 100 in the properties area. And let's just play that and see how that looks. That looks alright. If I was going to refine this even further, I would cushion the settle pose a little bit more. And we just might do that at the end. Let's just see how this goes. Alright, so we have to go through and fix all these pieces coming away from each other. Let's see where the worst problem is, and we'll start there. Or maybe we'll just start from the beginning. That looks like it's the worst. Alright, so let's fix in between key pose 1 and 2. So let's fix that torso. So what I'm going to do is just select the entire region in between and press F6, and that'll just key every frame. So we'll just go through and fix each one of these. So I'm going to make sure that it follows the pelvis. So I'm just going to step through, just keep putting it back to where the pelvis is. Like we did earlier in the walk cycle for the feet, and we're going to be using this technique quite a bit in Flash. Right in between key pose 1 and 2, we're gonna have this torso change. It changes artwork or swaps symbols on pose 2, but we're gonna have it happen between pose 1 and 2. So somewhere in the middle here. We want the symbol to switch in mid-motion so that it appears to be a little more hidden. It's not so obvious. So I went right in between there at, let's say, frame 3 and switched it, and we'll have to do it for the next 2 frames. So frame 4, switch it to 2. You have to have the symbol selected, and then first 2, and then frame 5, do the same thing. There. So now that torso switches right in between key pose 1 and 2. And by having it switch in mid-motion, it's less noticeable. On frame 5, it switches to torso number 3. So maybe we'll go to frame 4 and have it switch to 3 at that point. And we'll have to move it over a little. Okay, so there's a pretty big jump here from frame 4 to 5. So on frame 4, I'm just going to bring it back a little bit. Could just skew it. And that's not too bad. Alright, so let's take a look at the head. Again, we're going to be focusing on the center of the body. Head, neck, torso, and pelvis. We'll fix the rest of it after that. Actually, the head and neck look okay here. I notice the arm isn't really following the torso. Okay, so we're going to fix this. This elbow is really coming away from the upper arm. So I'm just setting 2 keys on the lower arm and hand and just putting it back into place. And let's have a look at our other elbow that seems to be breaking as well. So we'll just select the frames on the forearm and hand. We'll press F6. We're going to do 2 in the middle and just fix those. That should be okay. Yep. Okay, so the upper body's, so the center of the body's done. We have the arms done for in betweening the first 2 key poses. Now let's take a look at the feet. Okay, so we're gonna have to set some in between keys for the left foot and left knee. So F6. I'm just gonna set another key here. I can see that the knee is coming away from, or the lower leg's coming away from the knee. And we'll just fix the foot. We should probably switch the feet here too now, since we're refining. Okay, so we have foot number 7 here, and we have foot number 17. So we're going to switch that in the middle, just like we did the torso. And we want to look where the fastest movement is here. So while it's moving somewhere in between, let's say we'll switch it here to 7. And we're going to have to replace that, reposition that, and we'll change the rest of them. We want to get a nice arcing motion. If you watch the heel and we step through, it sort of pops up here on this frame. If I go back, I'm going to go forward again, and you can see the heel sort of starts to drop here, and then it pops up and then drops again. So we don't want to get rid of that area where it's popping up, and just make sure that it has a nice arcing motion, even if we rotate the foot a little so it doesn't look like it hits the ground. As you can see, refining animation can be a pretty long and laborious process, but in the end it's all worth it. I'm just going to move these down a little. So just scrubbing through, that looks okay on the leg. Alright, so from pose 2 to 3, we're okay. Alright, so we're going to go into our leap now. So we have to find these in-betweens between our anticipation and our launch pose. So you can see that there's only one frame here, it's a quick movement, and things get really bungled up. So I'm going to set a keyframe on the entire row, and then just fix anything that needs fixing, because it's only one keyframe. Okay, so let's work on the middle of the body first, like we always do. And we'll change this to torso 1. So that should be okay for now. We'll see how that looks. Scrub over. Okay, so for this launch pose, we're going to change the hands. Let's just work on the feet right now. Concentrate on one thing at a time. So I'm going to dive into that foot, and let's find the appropriate foot for this. That looks good. That's on frame 25. Yeah, so this foot, we can see there's an arch in this foot. The arch should not be on that side of the foot, it should be on the other side, so we wouldn't see it. So what I would normally do if I was working on a production is I would go into this foot just to create a new foot for this pose. You just copy all this artwork onto a new frame at the end. So you can do it right on the frame, just select the frame and copy frames, and then go to our last frame. You have to insert a frame and then paste frames. And then I would just go in and get rid of the arch and create a new foot. I'd probably get rid of this part too. Just bring this right out. So yeah, so we can easily create new parts from existing parts. So what's that on frame 27? So if we come back out, change it to select, make sure the symbol is selected and change it to frame 27. We'll have that new foot without the arch. Didn't do a very good job there. I just wanted to show you for the example. Okay, so that's how we can create new parts from existing parts. Alright, so let's just scrub over what we've done so far. So we have our launch pose. Okay, so I'm just looking at the feet right now. Alright, so this foot's okay. I'm okay with that. I just want to position it properly. Let's angle it down a little more so it's closer to the last pose. And we can choose a foot for this side. Let's angle these feet down as much as possible to match this last pose. And so now we're going to have to fix this situation with the feet. So I'm just going to set a key in between these two, our launch pose and the next pose. So I'll set 2 keys and we're going to switch it. This one I'm just going to fix the position. For the next in between, I'm going to switch it to our new foot. So that's being foot number 3. And let's switch it to foot number 3. And we'll angle that right down so it's closer to this last pose. And this one we can actually angle it up a little bit to match so it's closer to the next pose. That'll be a quick switch, and we'll do the same thing with this other foot. Now let's scrub over this. So it's 3 and 7, which we'll probably be going with for a while. So this one's still on 3. Let's just fix the positioning. We're not going to have to change these feet for a little while now. This is the top of our leap. Have the foot start to come back a little bit, and we'll fix this foot. That was 7. So let's swap the symbol, 7. And this foot can come up a little. So I'm making a change. I'm going to scrub through and see how it looks. Looks okay. Next pose. That goes to 7 before I forget what number it is. Okay, so we'll put it back. And this is good. We'll have the foot start to rotate up a little bit as he starts to make his way down. These feet are jointed. Obviously they're jointed at the ankle, so we'll start to bring them up a little bit to give us the impression that they have weight to them. And then let's scrub between our next 2 poses. We'll have to key the in-between on both feet for this one as well. And then just put them back into position. Okay, so let's go back to the feet we used before. That was 27 and 25. So 27 and 25, we're going to change these and move them into position. We'll set this one to 2, and we'll set this foot to, I think, 1. So we'll just keep switching these and moving them into position. Really want to make sure those feet stay planted, so I think I'm going to copy and paste. I'll be copying and pasting the frames. Copy frames. Paste frames, and we can do that to here as well. Just paste. Go to the next one, paste, and we'll just do it all the way down the timeline for each foot. Because we know now that these feet aren't gonna move now, except for here. When he settles, we can bring the foot back. That really shouldn't move, so we should move the leg. That foot should stay planted. Okay, so it slides. We're gonna fix that in a bit. Alright, so we got the feet pretty much worked out. Let's just watch the whole thing now. I'm just gonna play it. So the feet look good, legs look pretty good. We're going to fix this at the end. I'm going to put a step here. I'm going to have his left leg, as he starts to settle back, I'll have him step. So we'll fix that in a few minutes. Let's just fix the other major problems that are happening here. Okay, so let's fix this torso and the arms. So let's have this torso switch right in the center, or as he's starting to come up. So I'm going to put 2 keyframes right in the center, and we'll switch it to pose. We'll switch the torso to torso number 1 right in the middle. On this frame we can skew it a little bit, rotate it, just to get it closer to what it's going to be in the next frame. Don't want to move it too much. We're going to have to bring the head down a little too. So we have these 2 in between keyframes now, which sort of fixes our torso from popping. And when you play it, it's not too bad. You don't see it too much. Although it does dance around a little bit, so we're going to fix that as well. So we'll just set more keys where we see problems and just nudge things back into place. Go to the next one, nudge it into place. So I can see it's dancing around in this section as well. So actually I think for the torso we're going to have to key every frame for the settle, and we'll just nudge it back into place. Okay, so let's give the head a little bit of some overlap. So we're just going to pose it down a little bit as his body starts to rise, just to give the impression that the head has some weight to it. As he's pushing himself up off the ground, we'll have the head start to look like it's heavy just by giving it some overlapping action here. Okay, looks okay. So let's fix these arms. So we're going to try not to have to set a key on every single frame, but we'll see how this goes. So there's the hand, set a key in between. There's the forearm. We have a key set on all three parts of this arm. As we talked about earlier, Flash is, as I mentioned earlier, Flash is just animating in a linear fashion. So I think what we need to do is just put this arm back together. Like the upper arm's fine, it's rotating properly. We just need to fix the lower arm and the hand. So if we just put that back together and take a look at it. So I'm setting another key to fix this. And this should be okay. Oh, it's popping off quite a bit. Oh, that's because we eased it. What we could do is just set another key. We can change the easing, but it gets kind of confusing, so we'll just set more keys in between and just make sure that's nice and smooth. Once it's done, it's done. So okay, so the entire arm's popping off here. Okay, for some reason that's really popping, so we're just going to bring that right back up and just repose this section. Just repose this arm for this key. Yeah, so we're just going to have to put a key on every frame because this eases. There's one reason to not use Flash in betweens or Flash easing. We could just set a new pose to ease the character into his settle. Or if you want to do the automated Flash easing, then we have to I'm just going to select this entire block here and key it. F6, it's a key on everything. Just go to each frame and reposition the forearm and hand. The ease is still taking effect, and we just have to fix the forearm and hand. Not that big of a deal. So let's take a look at it now. Generally looks okay. Yeah, I could use a little more ease into the final pose. It does ease a little bit, but it's not too bad, but it could use some smoothing and a little more cushioning into that last pose. So it's not perfect, but generally we're looking pretty good here. The timing looks good. He has weight. He impacts the ground pretty hard, and he comes up to a nice settle. So the last thing we're going to do here, obviously, like I said, you can refine this further. Definitely refine this further. Let's animate the shadow. Alright, so from our first pose to the anticipation pose, he moves forward a little bit. So right about there, we'll set a key. Get that right under his feet. And actually that first pose should be under his feet a little bit more. Alright, so here, from here to here, this can be pretty constant. Let's see if we can just get it to move at a constant rate. So that's not going to look very good once we tween it, but we'll fix it. Yeah, it just looks like the shadow's floating across the ground, so what we're going to have to do is maybe we can flip it here. Just over one frame. So I have 1, 2, 3 frames keyed right next to each other. I'm going to do another one. So I'm going to copy frame 1 and put it at the end here. paste, and then we'll just move it back to where it's supposed to go. So this might be a bit of a cheat. And what we could also do is scale this up a little bit. Just scale it a little bit. Alright, so I'll set a key here and just bring it back a little bit. And we can have it pop into that final position. Since his body pops, move the shadow over a little bit. So this doesn't look too bad. So if we play this, so I'm thinking that shadow looks really distracting. I mean, the eye just wants to go there, to me anyways. So I think what I'm going to do is get rid of this frame. I'm just going to clear keyframe. And I just brought the last key over, dragged it one frame to the right in its place. And we'll just slide this over. Let's see if that's distracting. So I'm going to scale this right down since he's getting higher. And we'll just flatten it out. So we'll scale it down. And it seems to be moving ahead of him. Don't want that to happen. And then it gets larger as he gets closer to the ground. That looks better. Yeah, that torso is really popping. I don't want to leave it like this. So I'm going to switch that from 3. That's torso number 3. Let's go 3, 2, 1. Let's go right to the point where it pops. And instead of it popping here to 1, let's pop it to 2, and then we'll pop it to 1. So 2, and then 1. That's better. Alright, so let's cut it off at frame 50. So select all these extra frames, and let's just go remove frames. So now we go up to frame 50 or 49. That's fine. Let's back out of here, double click out into space. Just want to make sure we don't have any extra frames hanging over the edge here, otherwise things will start to disappear. And we can stop this one at around, well, that's okay, doesn't go on too long. Alright, so remember we had our mannequin leap. We had it right underneath our last pose. So now you can drag that. If we look at it now, they'll be on top of each other. So we can drag that mannequin leap key back underneath the blank keyframe of the other one, of the mannequin walk. One becomes invisible and the other one turns on. One last thing we have to do here. I'm noticing the shadow doesn't come with the walk, so let's do that. Alright, sorry. So the shadow for the walk comp is not in the walk comp. It's on the outside. So that's okay, we can still animate that. Just going to place it underneath him for the first key, and this should just be straight point A to point B. So we'll go right to the last frame of the walk comp, and just shift arrow key that over. Okay, so we have to turn it off. So right after the last keyframe, select the frame right after the last keyframe, and insert a blank keyframe, so it shuts off. And it does pop a little bit. So maybe we can raise it up a little bit, or sorry, it's up and then it pops down. So we should bring it down a little bit on the last frame. Let's get in closer and try and match that up a little bit better. Oh, we have to tween it, sorry. Let's tween that. That's okay. He lunges forward, so it's a bit of a pop. We'll just bring it over a tiny bit. Bring it closer to here. That's acceptable, I think. Alright, so now if we watch it, see if everything's in place. So I'd like to see you send me something like this, maybe a little bit more refined. Alright, so we'll go to File, we'll save this. We'll save it as Flash Body Mechanics 2, just same file name. You can just put an animated under, at the end of it, so you know this one's animated. Save it. Alright, so we want to go to File, Export a Video. Same settings as before, and export. If you had one previous, just say OK to that. And just change this to QuickTime. 720p is good. And navigate to where you want this to, where you want your QuickTime to exist. and start queue. Alright, so that's all done. You can close that up and look in the folder where it went, and you should have this QuickTime. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in the next class.